Hi everybody, Andy McPhee here, along with Doug Kenney, the main host of Relentless and Unstoppable. As with each series we do, I let people know how this started. Relentless and Unstoppable started about a year and a half ago after my coaching and mentoring of Doug for 6.5 years. Doug is an incredible human being who was he's dealing with high-functioning autism, and at school he was dealing with obesity and bullying and depression and medication and hospitalization, all those things that tend to come along with when you're dealing with something in life. And Doug, over the last few years, we've had an amazing journey. He's gone from 300 pounds to down to close to under 200 now. He does yoga, running, walking. He's now into bodybuilding, which we've organized and helped him, do it the correct way. His diet is incredible, and it's an inspiration of his story, which is why I created this channel. And since then, I think Doug said to me the other day, and he can confirm this, we've had probably 181,000 views over the last year or so, which is great for a couple of guys who have no idea what they're doing at all, like zero. But we're getting better, and I'm actually learning off Doug now because he is very relentless. He never gives up. So, Doug, I'll hand it over to you to introduce our amazing guest.
Oh yeah, because I had I was quite bad depression, so found out there was horse therapy, and yeah, I took that on, and yeah, I found it very calming and very helpful. Like, it was the best therapy I've ever done, probably. And yeah, I went up and like gave him hugs and yeah, everything like that. Then sorry.
Can I ask you how you felt when you first went there? Like, as soon the first day you went there, what were your thoughts of what you're doing there and what this is going to do for you?
I really wanted to do it because anything with animals, I found out that would help a lot. So, and horses, it was one of my first things with dogs and lots of other animals. So I thought I'll try horse therapy out. And yeah, it went really well.
What do they do for you, Brendan, when you're there? Like, you have a process of looking after the horses, and then how does that help? How did that help you sort of understand your depression and help you sort of break through that depressive, emotions and feelings that you're going through?
Yeah, I found out they were looking for people to work with the Brumbies, so they're rescued. They're a bit like Mustangs in America, or they call them Brumbies in Australia. So they're rescued, and yeah, they've got trapped, or they go out and shoot them because they're not native, they say. So our organization tries to go out and save them and look after them, then adopt them off to responsible people who are going to look after them. So it's sort of rescued horses. Otherwise, they would have been not here.
How did that help you with your depression?
Well, yeah, helping something else. And the horses are very therapeutic. So, and you get a lot of helping them. You feel like you're doing something worthwhile, and you make really good friends with them, really good relationships with them.
That's awesome. And you fed them and cleaned them, brushed them down, all that sort of thing.
Pretty much everything I've done. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, mate. And so it's sort of similar to what Nick was saying, when you related to the horse, that he's been through a lot of trauma, and it just took someone to care for that horse, that you suddenly saw that horse's spirit brighten up. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And that sort of helped you, correct? Like, if you can do it to a horse, then the horse is giving it back to you because he cares about you because you're looking after him.
Yes.
Or her.
And you can they sort of feel how you feel, and you sort of know what they feel like when you're close. You got a connection, and it's just calming. Like just watching them or whatever, they're very calming animals.
That's great. And how are you still working there now?
Yes, yeah.
How many days?
2 to 3 days usually, sometimes more. Yeah.
Are you riding the horses at all? Are you allowed to do that? Do they teach you?
Not there, but I ride horses. I go to a riding place occasionally, and I just go for a ride.
Wow.
Most of these horses actually go to houses where people have them as companions, and there's been ones who have turned into riding or therapy horses as well, Brumbies. So yeah.
Oh wow, that's awesome, mate. Doug, questions, mate?
Yeah, Nick, I must ask you, now that you brought some of that stuff up, what's the difference between horse therapy culture in Australia and horse therapy culture in America? And what's the difference as well between racing there and in America?
In terms of, it's an interesting question. So in terms of the horse therapy, what Scott would say about what he does is he would say, so in Australia, for instance, my cousin is an equine therapist. So she's actually done like a training program where she's now qualified to work with people that have different, say mental health issues, might be anxiety or depression. And what she does is she'll take, say, a troubled person, and she will pair them with a very well-adjusted horse. So very calm, placid horse. And then she'll work with that person, getting to know the horse, connecting with the horse. And in that interaction they have, it really seems to help the person. Whereas what Scott does in my documentary is a bit different. So Scott wouldn't refer to what he does as traditional equine therapy. He would say because he's not a therapist, right? So Scott's a professional horseman. So his whole thing is retraining ex-thoroughbred racehorses so they can have second careers. So he for the last 20 years, he's been much more focused on the horses than he has on the people. It's only in the last 5 or 6 years, someone asked him, would you mind working with some traumatized war veterans? And he said, look, I'm not a therapist. I'm not qualified to sit down and talk to them about their war experiences and that sort of thing. So in the film, that's why you never see him talking to the veterans on any therapy kind of level. All he talks to them about is how do we turn this horse from a discarded ex-race horse into a valuable equestrian horse or a therapy horse or a recreational horse. So he's kind of very much focused on what are the practical steps that we can do to retrain the horse. And in doing that, the veterans have seemed to find a lot of purpose in them helping an animal, So I'd say they're the two biggest differences, I guess, from what Scott does in the film, which he refers to as equine welfare, and what my cousin does, which is equine therapy. So that's I guess that's a difference worth just explaining in terms of if there's any equine therapists out there and they watch my film, they'll watch what Scott's doing and they'll think that's not equine therapy, right? And that's true. And Scott doesn't claim to be a therapist. He's a horseman.
That's really cool. That's really cool, man. Sorry to interrupt, Andy. I just have another question. In America, there's that trumpet fair that plays at horse races. Is that in Australia as well? Or no?
I don't think so.
Okay. What were you saying, Andy?
Oh no, I was just saying that how it's amazing how and people, I understand why therapists would say, well, he's not doing therapy. And all respect to the therapists because they're doing their part and they're helping people. But because of this, Scott's experience with horses and how well he knows horses as well as a therapist gets to know their clients, his power in knowing that horse saved a guy from shooting himself and putting himself in a grave. And that speaks, like, they're both differently trained, but they're both doing the same thing. So I think it's just amazing.
Yeah. And look, the interesting thing about Scott is that prior to working with the veterans, he was working with men in prison. So he would take his horse and he would take it into a prison in New South Wales. And he'd been doing this for years. And he would teach the guys in prison who were soon to be released. He would start saying, okay, this is how we're going to retrain this ex-thoroughbred racehorse and give it a new career. So you got these guys who've been locked up, institutionalized in a very tough environment for, years and years. They're just about to go back out into society. This prison had like a problem with a lot of these guys. A year later, they end up back in prison. So they thought, we've got to do something to different with these blokes, So when they got Scott on board, they just found that the guys that worked with the horses never ended up going back to prison. And I met one of those guys. He actually helped Scott as in a volunteer capacity in Scott's thing. And I met this bloke, and his name's Digger, really great guy. And I asked him, I said, how come the horses helped you so much? And he said, mate, when I was in prison, he said, you cannot show your emotion in prison. You can't let people know you're having a bad day or you're sad or you're whatever. You've got to really keep a straight face. You've got to be really tough to get through it. And it turns you into a very hard person. And so he said, so when you get out, that's not a good way to be in society. You're going to have a lot of problems if you can't show your emotion and you can't be, soft and vulnerable, and you're going to have trouble in relationships. So he said the horse helped him transition from a very tough, rigid, tense guy into someone who was softer and someone, he said, I was able to let out some emotion around the horse in a way I could never do around a person in a prison, because they would probably take advantage of it in some way. So he said after working with the horse for half an hour, I remember he said, walk around the side of the horse and sort of hide from the others because I just started crying.
Wow.
And he said, I didn't even know why. It's just the horse was so gentle to him. It's such a big thing too. Like, the thoroughbred racehorses, they're like they're the elite athlete of the equestrian world. They're like the Olympic athletes of horse racing. So they're big, they're incredibly beautiful, they're really well muscled. And you feel their power when you're next to them. So any ideas you have of trying to intimidate this horse, or, like a soldier might or a prisoner might or whatever, this horse has the power. If it wanted to, it could stomp on you, no problem. So you got to deal with your ego a bit too, dealing with a thoroughbred racehorse. But this guy was just like, there is something about horses that when they look at you, there is like a power in their eyes. There's something very intelligent and very, they're very emotionally intuitive about people. And this guy said, look, I can't explain it, but I had to walk around this horse and I just started crying. And you can imagine that guys that are able to start dealing with those sort of emotions before they're released, it could only be a good thing. It could only make them a bit more, gentle and calmer before they get out.